the floatboats going downstream that John's referring to throw their flies at the banks. The anglers walking the banks typically fish upstream over their heads and let it float down over their heads along the banks. And the largest fish in the river have the the best positions along the bank, actually under the banks, watching things crawl out up in that and just keep eating them all day long as they try to crawl their way out. So you need to know where these insects emerge helps a lot. This understanding that John will give you tonight and that Mike will give you during the program today. The more you understand, or you glean from books, or you glean from videos, or you glean from the fly shop locally, where they emerge, what time of day they're going to crawl out of the river, and where you want to be located. So.
Okay, we talked about stoneflies, and we talked about mayfly nymphs. Stonefly nymphs have gills right under here. Okay, so if you see white gills under the thorax, if you notice on that black, you would have seen those little white gills. Here's another example of a very common stonefly. This is called a golden, and this is a small one. He's not really as large as he's going to get, but sometimes you'll see their picture on the front of fly fishing magazines. They're very photogenic. People like to take pictures of them. I've got a lot of really neat pictures of those.
Cover girls.
Yeah, cover girls. That was my buddy Dr. Nelson said, boy, you know, those are so cool. But anyway, there's a couple forms of this golden. It's a fairly big stonefly. Comes off typically May and June. And there's a brownish form and there's more of a tannish form like that one. They're very closely related. They're different from the black, different species. But then there's a whole series of little yellow stoneflies that hatch in about this time in July. Sometimes you'll see them. And then there's a whole bunch of black ones that occur early in the year. And if any of you happen to do any cross-country skiing along a river, it's not unusual to see some stoneflies in the snow. And very unusual creatures, because as far as I know, they're the only insects that can stand cold weather or freezing weather. They seem to be perfectly happy, you know, below freezing weather. So very unusual. And of course, if you're a steelhead fisherman, a little black stonefly pattern like that can work really, really wonders. So, and they eat them, of course, in large numbers. Stoneflies do not fly well. You know, they're not like the caddisflies. You know, so when they take off, they go really slow. You know, they're really flapping like crazy, and they can just barely stay in the air.
So those are flies that have the flat wings?
Yeah, the stoneflies have flat wings. Yep. Caddisflies have tent-shaped wings. Yep. Yep. Okay, we're gonna go quick. Dragonfly is another very interesting creature. And you'll notice it shoots water out its tail like a little rocket.
Oh, yeah.
And it has a mouth that opens up like these big airplanes, you know, where they drive trucks in, you know. Or like a python that eats a pig, you know, they're capable of eating something almost their own size. So very ferocious, very agile flyers. You know, man can only dream of flying as well as a dragonfly. I mean, they're absolute, total control of their position. You know, of course, they eat a lot of mosquitoes, and so very beneficial. Very pretty. You know, the adults are red, green. You know, their organizations, all they do is take pictures of dragonflies. You know, so it's kind of a thing to do. Damselflies are close to dragonflies, a little bit smaller. Damselflies have three paddle-like tails. If you look at their tails, three little tails, so you can identify the damsels easily that way. Obviously quite common on our streams. There are some of the mountain lakes have very, very large hatches of damselflies. There's some blue damselflies. A friend of mine took a picture of a big fish he cut open, and its belly was so full of these little blue damselflies that it was just totally stuffed with them, you know. So that can be important. Okay, dobsonfly. Have you heard of a helgramite or a dobsonfly before? That's a dobsonfly. That's a small one. They get very big. They get to be about that long. And my buddy Bruce calls them toe biters. You know, if you put your finger in the wrong place, they might bite it, as a crayfish would pinch your finger. You know, you're not going to die or anything, but they could pinch your finger a little bit. If you look and read in all the books, those are supposed to be primary smallmouth food. You know, smallmouth eat a lot of those, right? Wrong. They don't. Studies have shown that they don't actually eat them, but anyway, that's the legend of the thing. Okay, that's dobsonflies. Okay, here's another one. Little crustaceans. This is called a grammarius or a scud. If you went to a restaurant recently and ate a shrimp, it looks just like that, only that one's about 1/4 inch long. If any of you ever have a chance to fish the Bighorn River in Montana, most of the flies are designed to look like scuds. They have pink ones and they have orange ones that look like that. So 90% of the big fish you catch in the Bighorn are caught with patterns that look like that. They're kind of orange, kind of an orange color to them. So very, very common. Let's see what else. Okay, this is called a water boatman here. And sometimes these water boatmen are found along the edges of our streams where the water's not very fast. You won't find out in the current. There's always in a little pool or something, or a pond or something you might find them. And sometimes trout do eat them. Those do bite, I guess. I read an article one time where a water boatman bite, or maybe it's back swimmers. I forget which one bites. Anyway, I can't remember. It's the back swimmer or the water boatman.
Water boatman, I think.
The water boatman. Yeah, I can't remember. Anyway, okay. Let's see. We talked about the Dobson. Did we pass the Dobson fly around?
No, we did.
Yeah,
Well,
we did.
I thought that's why you were talking about things that bite.
Yeah. I guess I did. Yeah.
Almost none of these even
I'm losing
have.
my mind here.
None of them can eat when they emerge as winged insects,
Oh,
mayflies, for
right,
example.
right.
Aquatic worms.
But,
Obviously,
Pilgrimates
sometimes there are worms in our rivers. And then terrestrial worms. One of the things that happens when you get a big rainstorm like we just had, a lot of the worms are washed in the water.
Right.
Now what does this do to the fishing? Sometimes it totally screws
Yeah,
it up
right.
because the fish have their bellies full of worms, and they don't eat anything. So sometimes the fishing can
Did
be...
you get the Dobson, or
That's
the
the
damsel?
damsel,
And did you get the...
Yeah, I think we passed the... I did pass the Dobson around.
Yes, yes, you did.
I get confused. I can't remember. Okay. Yeah,
Get the scuds?
We did the scuds. Yeah, I think we're just about wrapping
Good,
up.
good.
Okay. Besides aquatic macrovertebrates, there are also fish that are important as a trout fisherman, and this is called a sculpin. And in your little movie, they probably talked about sculpins, right? So you can appreciate that if you're a big brown trout that long, that would be a very, very good meal for you. So obviously, a lot of our streamers and things like that are designed to look like those sculpins, So if you go down below Mayo, particularly, they use a lot of streamer fishing techniques down there to catch some pretty nice browns. And so a lot of flies have big heads on them like that and designed to look like sculpins. So pretty effective. So
Listen, just so you understand, there are only, in all regions of the country where there are cold water resources, where there are trout and so forth, there are only so many major hatches. We sort of time the seasons of trout fishing in Michigan, for example, by about 5 or 6 major hatches that we're ready for with the proper hatch materials, flies, and so on. And we've learned the time of day they emerge and the kind of water to look for them and so forth. And you'll learn those 5 or 6 over time. Now there's many others, as you can see here, there's a lot that you can learn. And this may be one of those aspects of fly fishing that you really love, like John is just obsessed with it. I mean, you can see there's something wrong with the guy. and we too, have a little bit of that obsession, and you may too, and you may have a lot, but it's just one more aspect of it that's a lot of fun. But if you take some notes, learn them one at a time. They occur at the same time of year each year, roughly, give or take a week or two. We're sort of ahead of it this year because of the warm weather, right? But make a few notes in a little notebook, keep track of that kind of thing, and review your notes before you go fishing next year at the same time, and you'll be better prepared, and you'll remember the words, the names and so forth, the common names and these fancy names, or not. But the point is that you'll have a better idea of how to prepare for the day's fishing or the week's fishing. Fly shops locally are very important resources to use because their guides are out on the river every day. Their customers are out on the water every day. They get a lot of information. They're a clearinghouse for information. Take advantage of that. Most have websites that you can look at. If you're going to Grayling, there's fly shops there. If you're coming up to fish the Borden and the Manistee, we have it. If you're going out to West Yellowstone to fish the Madison, Yellowstone, the Gallatin, and rivers like that, there are fly shops there. They'll have that hatch information for you so you can be better prepared when you get there. Take advantage of those things, a little research, and keep track of that. And it doesn't have to be that complicated thing. Mike will make sense out of it tonight so that you can make easy judgments on how to put the right fly on without being some entomological giant like John here, So pay attention at this. Don't miss you'll be at his program for sure this afternoon after lunch. Don't miss John's program this evening after dinner, because it's a real good one to help you make those decisions and learn a little more about the critters.
John, I fish over below Mile most of the time.
Sure,
and
yeah.
This year, I was out in my boat 4 days in a row during in the earlier part of the season during the caddis craziness. And
now this is mid-May type thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
We saw it, and I had never seen this before. 25 years of fishing, I've never seen it quite this heavy, but we had it
Look,
fun.
amplified, see it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. His little wings at rest. When his wings are at rest, they're behind his body. as opposed to the dragonfly, which would be down. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's right. We saw just a ton of Midwest salmon flies, and that's what people